Hi, this is Mrs. Batson, and I'm going to talk about Song Sunam and his titled work, Summer Trees. He was Korean, and after the annexation in 1910, Korea remained part of Japan until 1945, when the U.S. Soviet Union and Britain took control at the end of World War II. So to give you a reference, here is Japan, here is North and South Korea, which were separated. And Korea was divided into two, and the democratic people of Korea remained communist there in the north, while the southern part of Korea emerged as a fully industrialized nation under American military presence, and was fully Americanized in a way, or westernized, I should say, much like we are here in America. Here is a picture of Sam Sunam, and he had a lot of exposure to art from all around the world, and some artists embraced the culture of the West, while others continued to be influenced by their Eastern Asian traditions. And he was one of those who combined the two and used his native Korean roots with the international trade, traditional art in Song Sunam's pieces. He grew up in South Korea, where people were in constant fear of the hostility that was going on in North Korea. And so while there was modernization and Western influence where he was living, there was still constant fear of what might happen coming from the North. Literatus. So we learned about this when we talked about China and how the Literati were people who were artists that broke away from the norm, and they weren't working for the king or the emperor, I should say, and they were working for themselves, and they were living out on their own, usually found in nature, because that's what they found most inspiring. And so these people didn't necessarily make money selling their artwork. A lot of times they would just give their pieces away because it's what they wanted to do. They weren't doing art for the money. They were doing it to make pure art. He was the founder of the Sumikawa, which was the Oriental ink movement from the late 1980s. And the Sumikawa is a Korean pronunciation of the Chinese word for ink wash painting. And ink wash is basically taking ink and grinding it down and using it like a watercolor on typically rice paper. This was called the Literati paintings because scholarly poets or scholarly artists are a type of ideal man from the 11th century in China and before. Chinese poetry was considered to be the noblest form of art, and ink wash painting was considered its twin, because when writing of poetry and creating something beautiful, it's the same in their culture as painting something and using tools and using those techniques to create something beautiful. Mountainous landscapes and other surroundings serves as a metaphor for their ideal qualities of members in the Literati, such as loyalty, intelligence, spirituality, and strength of adversity, getting through something when it's really, really tough. The world of beauty being nature and away, and from the distractions, and from the power and the money, having all of that influence you. Those were the desires of the Literatus group. So here's a picture of Song Sunam's Summer Trees from 1983, ink on paper, and it's 2 feet by 1 5/8 inches, and it's in the British Museum today. The theme for this is objects of wealth and ritual, and his painting Summer Tree was inspired by the abstract expressionists. If you remember Jackson Pollock with the drip paintings, those kind of work where it's just very expressive and it's how you're feeling at the moment. A lot of his work, Song Sunam's work, are based on those type of works. He made 2 paintings that were really similar, one titled Trees from 1986 and another titled the same from 2000. And it wasn't until 2000 that he fully embraced abstraction, leaving his works untitled completely. Song Sunam created many untitled works on this very same ink, with ink on rice paper. Here's a picture of the titled trees that's very similar. And I chose this because it has some really great techniques that I want to talk about for a minute. His brush strokes are really wide, and he's exploring the variation of tones and different hues. So you have this really rich, deep black, and then you also have some very feathered out, very light grays, especially up in this area, which right up here, in this area here, and some very, very, very dark blacks here and here. He has this beautiful feathering of the edge in some of these areas, like right in here and right in here, which is beautiful, and it's just the perfect amount of paint on the brush and the perfect amount of moisture on the paper as well. While other edges are ragged and dry. Now this one doesn't show as much of the dry technique as Summer Trees does, but it does have some areas that are a little bit dry. He uses his ink showing us deeply rooted in his culture. And as a group, so in his culture, a group of pine trees can symbolize a gathering of friends or of moral character. And part of the reason why he did this, because he was trying to impress that upon us and talk to us about this. Summer Trees has some great examples of this dry brush technique that I was talking about right here and right here, right here, where it just means that he's got paint on the brush, but the paint is kind of dry, and then the paper is probably dry as well, and able to create that. So again, wide brush strokes, exploring variations of tones from very light contrast to darker contrast, feathering the edges in some of his strokes, and other edges are ragged and dry. He's using the ink, which is deeply rooted in his culture. And a group of pine trees can symbolize a gathering of friends or moral character. Okay, so in this quote, Dr. Hannah Singer, Summer Trees, with its allusion to friendship and a balmy season, could be song's statement of optimism and the rediscovery of traditional values recast for modern times. And so that's really what this is all about. I had a short video here that's attached, but somehow the video is not currently working. And so hopefully that will be up sometime soon. And that is my presentation on Song Sunam's Summer Trees.